I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. We've got a great program as always, but before we get into it, I want to invite you to support this program by becoming a subscriber. We're sending this story out across a variety of platforms. We're on YouTube, both for Black Press USA and for Insight News. We're on Facebook for Black Press USA and for Insight News. And we also are streaming across Al McFarlane, my personal page on Facebook. We're streaming on Twitter, and we're streaming on LinkedIn. The idea is to use every possible medium to connect with you and to create what I call robust conversations, to recognize that our voices, our interests, our analyses are important and they deserve each other. We deserve to be in a process where we complicate in a positive way each other's lives as we build futures, narratives that depict us as the winners, the creators and the winners. So, the other thing that I want to talk about is the relationship between this program, these social media tools, vehicles, and our community newspaper. Our flagship at McFarlane Media is Insight News. It's a weekly community newspaper. And if you get a minute, go to issue.com/Insight News. That's ISSUU.com/Insight News. That's here on the screen now, a copy of, it's like a PDF, and it's a PDF of Monday's edition. So this is a few days early. Today's what, Thursday? We went to press last night with this publication, and here it is available online or at issue.com. This is particularly beautiful because one of my guests today, Reggie Taylor, is the artist who did this and also has one of our lead stories in the paper. In fact, I love this image. I love the power of it, the meaning of it, and how we are elevating and presenting and celebrating our identity. And this is one of the ways, one of the tools for doing that. Well, the other PDF here of page 3, if we can pull that up, shows you how we extracted the image of the griot, the storyteller, the elder, for the cover. But when you pull back, there's the full picture. And is it ever a powerful picture? An elder teaching at the fireplace under the tree of life, the tree of the community. And that's classic. The question Brother Reggie Taylor raises is the question in the headline. And that question is an important one that we have to always be considering. And now, as we move on to Black History Month, we have to give extra thought, extra time. The question is, does Black History Month adequately I can't read my headliner and enlarge my picture. Adequately honor our African American ancestry and heritage. Well, it's a good article by Reggie Taylor. I want you to read it. Go to issue.com, ISSUU.com/Insight News and look at that. And the other thing you can do is when you go there, you'll find that story, but what you find is an archive, a 40, 50, 100 recent, consecutive editions of Insight News. And when you look at the series of covers, man, I'm telling you, what we've done is powerful, impactful, unique. We have, and we are, I believe, mastering the idea of self-definition, of putting our ideas out in a graphic and powerful, in a daring, a bold, unapologetic way. So look at that archive, the covers of the past 100 issues of Insight News, and let me know what you think. Send me a note, drop me a line, hit me up on any of the social media platforms. Finally, my initial question to you was, or comment was that I want you to support this work. And you can support it best by becoming a member or a subscriber. Would you go to the Insight News YouTube page, even though you may be on another platform, but subscribe. We want to grow our subscribers from around 230, 40 right now to 1,000. We're going to do it quickly. And I'm going to ask you to not only subscribe yourself, but send a link and an invitation, a personal note to everybody that's close to you that's traveling down the same path with us, a path towards liberation, self-actualization, self-identity, the path towards empowerment. Invite them to join the conversation with Al McFarlane. Well, thank you. I'm gonna go into our program today, be kind of in a review of what's going to happen in this program. Thursdays we always talk with some partners, colleagues, friends that we called colleagues, and we'll be doing that as well today. But on the things we'll talk about, a lot of buzz about what's happening at Bethune Cookman College in Daytona Beach, Florida. Historic Black college, and right now a major conflict over the dismissal or the refusal to hire the football coach, Ed Reed, who's a celebrated professional football player who wanted to bring a new energy to the athletic department, the football program in particular at Bethune Cookman. We'll talk about that a little bit. We also are going to talk about Governor Tim Walz's budget. Good story on that, just to bring you up to date. Have you heard about Snoop Dogg and Master P's new cereal? When I saw the story on TV, I didn't realize that there's a Minnesota connection, that a national food processing corporation based just down the road here in southern Minnesota is in partnership with Snoop Dogg and Master P to launch a new cereal. We'll show you a little of that story. And finally, I want to always keep us up on what's happening in places like Jackson. There's developments in the story about the water in Jackson, Mississippi. Well, let me get to the program, and I think we want to start with a mention of breaking news in the Tyree Nichols case. I think we've got a video or a slide or something on Tyree Nichols. There it is. Ben Crump is tweeting that the 5 former Memphis Police Department officers have been indicted by a grand jury on charges ranging from second-degree murder, aggravated assault, aggravated kidnapping, official misconduct, and official oppression for the death of Tyree Nichols. Tragic case, but here we go again. And this is unique, not unique, but it's I don't know the right word for it, but we can see that all the officers charged are Black officers, and the Nichols, obviously a young Black man. So let's talk about that. That's something that we have to be concerned about, police violence in general. And the question is, does just the fact that we have Black cops means we are free of police misconduct? Obviously not. Anyway, important topic. The next thing I want to talk about is the governor's budget. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has now presenting what some are calling a history-making spending campaign, and the issue is that Minnesota has a $18 billion surplus. And so an article in Min Post, I think the article is posted today, says that the $17.6 billion surplus means that Walz gets both to spend money on new programs and cut taxes. And in fact, this volume for Walz this year is, the fund volume for Walz this year is at levels that have never been seen before in Minnesota. So it's a big issue. The article, I'll read a couple of paragraphs, says that when a student at St. Paul Grade School last week asked Governor Tim Walz why he wanted to be governor, he quickly said, for this day. And he was referring to the release of a $5.2 billion boost for education and families with kids, part of his proposed $65.2 billion budget. And he's come up with a 2-year budget plan that is, really aggressive when you consider that the governor gets to increase spending and cut taxes, and that there's the $17.6 billion surplus means he can do both. And so the article is saying that he's really in a fun position, that he's having the time of his life because he gets to do both things, and that hasn't happened before. It does quote Walz as saying that what he's presenting is a balanced budget, but it's far more than that. He says that this budget is transformational. Well, we had a couple of shows already talking about the budget and about the proposal from the um, United Black Legislative uh, Initiative coming from the Black community, asking for us to make sure that our community, that Black people, get our share of the money that is coming down the pike through the new budget. I've got a few more things to talk about. I want to bring our guest in right now, and we can come back to some of the other topics that I had in mind. I see my colleague Reggie Taylor is here. Reggie Taylor is a reporter out of the Baltimore area, and as I mentioned, the author of both the art and the lead story in the upcoming edition of Inside News. Reggie, good afternoon. Good to see you, man.
Good. Thank you very much, Al. And hello, everyone that's watching. I appreciate participating in this great conversation today.
And let me introduce you to Jonathan Palmer. Jonathan Palmer is a dear friend, companion. He and I are both Morehouse men. He and I are both Afro-Irish or Afro-Scotch, Afro-Scot. Uh, he can clarify that. He's a genealogist and active in the McFarlane clan worldwide. And he just blows me away talking about that. But Jonathan leads a signature or flagship legacy service institution in Minnesota. It's the Hallie Q. Brown Community Center in St. Paul. It's been the hub for Black life for over a century, I guess, for Black people, more than that, in St. Paul and really in Minnesota. Jonathan, welcome, brother. Good to see you again.
Al, great to see you as well. And Reggie, good to meet you. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. Yeah, Hallie itself has been here 94 years, but our preceding organization was here 1913. So we're just at that 100-year kind of mark of between the two organizations. And the Afro-Scot, I love that. I'm gonna use that a lot more. So I am the director of heritage for Clan McFarlane. So the Scottish, my father's family goes back to Scotland, and so I'm active on the international level with the clan, the Scottish clan, I should say, so that we don't get confused about that other group that we don't want to talk about right now. But yeah, very glad to be here and part of the conversation today.
Well, great. Let me ask you guys to weigh in on a couple of issues that I brought up in the opening topics, particularly the issue of what's happening at Bethune Cookman College. If you're following that, the story is that Ed Reed, a former pro football player, I think he was a Hall of Famer, kind of like Coach Prime, but not quite. Recommended, as I understand it, by Coach Prime to go to Bethune as it was seeking to build out its football program. And he came on campus kind of like in a whirlwind and got energized student and student leadership activity, and had criticized some of the shortcomings of the institution and of the administration. He said not to shade the organization, but to spur it to making the move towards being a better represented and better serving of its clients, the students. And so he got pushback from the administration. And finally, though he was at work and working while the contract was being developed, the university withdrew the contract, did not hire him. And that led to protest by the students, and the protest doing interviews with both the president and with students. I think we have clips of that. If we do, I'm going to show that and then have the three of us kick it on that, if those clips are available. We don't have clips. Okay, I thought we had clips of it. But have you followed that at all, Jonathan or Reggie? Are either of you familiar?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. Of course, you talked about Mr. Reed and his background, and you didn't mention that he was from Baltimore and played for the Baltimore Ravens. I'd like to add that. But his point is well taken. He went to the school and he recognized just all the shortcomings that they have, realizing that he couldn't come in and work miracles if he didn't have the infrastructure and the resources to do that. And it's ironic because if you look at the largest schools, the Big Ten, if you look at the large successful schools, they're predominantly Caucasian and their teams are predominantly African American. But if you look at the HBCUs, they're predominantly African American and their teams are not very competitive. So there's been a talent drain there. And apparently he sees not only the talent drain, but the lack of resources and available infrastructure to make this team successful quickly.
This is it is very well taken, because this is one of the challenges we run into a lot at HBCUs. Our alma mater, Morehouse College, right now is interviewing. In fact, one of my classmates is up for the head coaching job there. And the challenge you get into is resources. When you look at the HBCUs getting enough money in to support the colleges, they don't get the same resources that you get at a Big Ten school. And yet they're producing the most Black doctors, Black lawyers, critical thinkers. You look across the spectrum of leaders in this country, and the majority you'll find went to HBCUs. And so when you come to conditions like this is a combination of things. You can't just point to, well, the administration didn't do its job. It's sometimes part of it is the administration, part of it is the fundraising, part of it is how schools are treated when they're HBCUs, and the focus on that. So I feel for Coach Reed and exactly what he is talking about. I empathize with him. I think he did the right thing about apologizing, but I understand the frustration that would lead to that. So it's a challenging issue with many different sides to it.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane, and with my colleagues, I call them companions today, Reggie Taylor, a journalist, artist, designer, author from the Baltimore area, and now a contributing writer for Inside News. He is the author of the cover of the upcoming edition of Inside News, meaning his art graces our cover, and it's art that leads the newspaper with the main story, considering what Black history should mean to us these days. And Jonathan Palmer, the executive director of the Hallie Q. Brown Community Center in St. Paul, and like me, a fellow Morehouse man. Jonathan, I watched this week Morehouse and Howard on television. I was surprised to see it. I mean, so something's happening. And the question is, and I bring this back to both Coach Reed, and he obviously is in an elevated position from my point of view because of all the stuff that Coach Prime has been doing. But Prime at Jackson State has elevated awareness and marketability of HCBUs in a way that, as far as I know, has never been done before. Am I correct in that assessment, Jonathan?
Most definitely. And you're seeing a lot more growth around this kind of area. Last fall, I joined a bunch of my classmates from Morehouse and Spelman to go to the HBCU Classic up in New York. And so a number of us made the pilgrimage across the country, where Howard played Morehouse. Howard keeps beating us. I hate to admit that, but my Howard friends will tease about that. But we got there. There were people tailgating.
Jonathan, I told my wife as we watched the game, nobody goes to Morehouse to go to the pros. Number one. And so the guys on the Morehouse team, this is my assessment, and pardon me if I'm being disrespectful to anybody in sports or even at a school. But my sense is that if you're playing sports at Morehouse, you simply love to play sports, but you have no intention of a career. Though that's not true of everybody, because there have been some people that have launched phenomenal careers, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Most definitely, and you can do it. There's a number of them that came out of Morehouse's football program. One of my classmates, Gerard Wilshire, is coaching at Rice. He's been 30 years out there coaching in college, and so there are people that do come out, but the colleges, HBCUs, are starting to elevate to that point where people will come to them that want to go to the pros or want to go into football as a career. But more often than not, for the HBCUs, they're going for the education. And some of that does include working with the different programs. But that's what you're starting to see, is a lot more attention, people starting to recognize that the alumni want to show up. And that tailgating, some of the people tailgating at the Classic didn't go to Howard or Morehouse. They just came out because it was an HBCU, and they went to another HBCU. So there is a lot of energy around that. There's a lot of marketability around that. It's an opportunity for colleges and for industry to make more money around the piece that is happening out there, but it's also to build the interest in the schools themselves. So this is an opportunity that is opening up. But we do have to take care of the facilities. We do have to go in. Coach Reed shouldn't have been walking into an office that hadn't been cleaned out. I mean, that's just unprofessional, no matter who you are. So there's both sides to this.
Reggie, Baltimore is a college town for Black folks, both with Morgan. My daughter is a graduate of Morgan, a proud Morgan alum, so we're a Morgan family. And then Chopin State and other schools, Coppin State. So talk about the college environment, the HBCU environment in Baltimore, and what this attention that that Prime and others are bringing to HBCUs mean. I think his spotlight is the current iteration of a spotlight developed by Cosby, for example, when they introduced the college campus programs back in the day. I can't think of the name of it. You will in a minute, but each time either sports or creatives focus on college life, they ignite again anew, expand the interest in our families and the beauty of aspiration of being in a walk of life that is steeped in culture and that believes in us, that doesn't question our identity, and therefore I think that when students go to HBCUs, they have the feeling that everybody here wants me to succeed, and I'm part of a legacy of success. But how does that look and sound in Baltimore to you, Reggie Taylor?
It's a mixed bag. Fortunately for Morgan and Coppin, I was just at my niece lives about 4 blocks from Morgan State University. I was just there over the holidays, and the facilities are magnificent. They've grown by leaps and bounds. A lot of money is coming in. Coppin is producing a tremendous amount of qualified, dedicated teachers. Morgan State University has a tremendous engineering program. They just got a ton of money and expanded their journalism program of producing a lot of professional journalists. The downside, unfortunately, is that both of these schools are located in communities that have very high incidence of crime. It is not unusual for one or two Morgan or Coppin State students per year to be murdered.
Whoa.
We had a murder at Morgan State University about 6 or 8 weeks after school started back in the fall. And the campuses are so urban that they're subject to the victimization of the prison culture. I wrote a piece last year for the Baltimore Times about the fact that over 10,000 ex-offenders are being released onto the streets of Baltimore every year, 10,000. The recidivism rate within 36 months is 40%. So almost half of those people are going back to prison. But what is happening is that the prison culture and the street culture are merging into one culture, and it's becoming more violent, it's becoming more drug prone, and they at both of those schools are encompassed by communities that have that problem. So they're scaring away some students, and they're disrupting the education of the students that stay, and more resources are being dedicated. For instance, Johns Hopkins University, it's a almost a huge college town. Johns Hopkins University has petitioned, and just late last fall finally got the approval of the city of Baltimore to develop its own police force. Highly controversial move. And the fear is, well, once you set that trend, will Coppin and Morgan and some of the other Baltimore area colleges and universities go that route? More guns on the street, more confrontations with law enforcement, more problems. So the long and short of it is they're doing a great job. They're expanding, but the environment that they have to contend with to be able to educate the kids that come there, that's a problem.
Jonathan, I remember at Morehouse when I was there, a generation before you. I started at Morehouse in 1965, but there was a classic division between the people in the AU campus community, Morehouse, Spelman, then University, Clark, and Morse Brown, and the neighborhood that we were in Atlanta, and not far from the immediate campus, were very depressed areas of the community, and we would always talk as students. I think the language we used was the campus people and the Jodies or something. I can't remember the name. There's some name we had for referring to locals that was not complimentary. It was kind of dismissive and derogatory. Things might have progressed or not when you came to Morehouse probably a dozen years later. What was it like then? And what do you think it's like now? We got about a minute left on the segment.
Well, the interesting thing, I came the year after school days, and so you did see some of that. Samuel L. Jackson, Morehouse, the graduate, also featured, and he played one of the locals in that movie, and it was still a lot like that. And in fact, I was there after the Rodney King verdict came down, and there was a lot of pieces that were still problematic, and that area got really decimated. But what has happened is that the colleges around have brought up that area and started to transform them into dorms and other pieces that were there, so that there's doing some urban renewal within there, but in a way that's more positive, so that it can be used for campus housing. It can bring in more of the students who are around and utilize more work out in the community. You see that with all the HBCUs. Almost all the HBCUs are in neighborhoods that have challenges that have been impacted. But one of the good things that HBCUs can do is help to spur some growth and development within the community.
And that's the name of the game. I think we use things that are perceived to be liabilities as stepping stones, and really to see the asset side of it. That means, Jonathan, from my point of view, that we have to continually cast ourselves as problem solvers and say that the situations we describe are not ones that leave us with a sense of woe, that make us throw our hands up and wonder why me, but rather put our gloves on and say, oh boy, here's a wonderful problem. Let's get to work, because we are the problem solvers, and we solve problems with an eye towards accountability. And the accounting includes just that: watching the money, getting the money, and using that money to fix the problem, the fixing itself, building wealth, building opportunity, building connection in our community. Well,
very much with great power comes great responsibility, and that's what we have to do. Yasmin had mentioned about some of the growth of the Fisk gymnastics team.
Yeah.
Morehouse also has a volleyball team. I actually talked about the Fisk gymnastics team to my daughter last night, because I said, hey, if you're ever thinking of going over to an HBCU, Fisk has a gymnastics team, and that was one of her big things in high school. sports with gymnastics.
And Fisk is our producer, Yasmin Hayes' alma mater. So there we go. Kudos to Fisk. And well, let's go talk more about the budget. Have you been watching and thinking about hearing much information about Governor Walz's budget, this unique opportunity we have in Minnesota with the $17.6 billion surplus? What does it mean for our community, Jonathan Palmer?
I think there's a great opportunity, and I really appreciate what Governor Walz is proposing for the budget. Looking at some of the spending that would go into education, that would be supportive of some of the programs in the community. One of the interesting piece is that it's got a little controversy on it because people, don't necessarily like this when we're talking about taxes, but the rebate checks that they're looking at, giving people in Minnesota back a portion of that. I think it's a great idea. I think people would be excited about that. A lot of this will go into the legislature for them to debate over the pieces, but I'm very excited. And I think you mentioned it earlier that Governor Walz is like a kid in a candy store. It's the best of both worlds. He gets to do some spending and some tax cuts that will help people.
How did the budget surplus get so big? Are you aware of that, Jonathan? What the mechanics of accounting and of the flows of revenue are such that we got a budget that we haven't had like this before?
I don't have the specifics, but it's the overtime as the different kinds of reserves on the spending have gone through, and some of the measures that have been taken. But I couldn't get you down to specifics on there.
Okay, great. So let me bring you in. You're not in Minnesota, but you are watching city government in Baltimore, Brother Taylor. What are the budget and management challenges that are unique to cities like Baltimore, where you have, I think, a majority or near a majority of people of color? Describe Baltimore and how it works and how Black interest can and do emerge in that market.
If I may, Al, I'd like to speak a little bit to the situation in Minnesota with Governor Walz.
Sure.
I did in preparation for the show, I did a pretty deep dive into what Governor Walz is trying to do, and I'm cautiously optimistic. I think that he is well-meaning. I think he's sincere. Like Jonathan said, he's like a kid in a candy store. This is, like he told the kid, this is the day he's been living for politically. My concern is parity and equity. My concern is when he talks about making the state the best state in the country for kids, when you look at children of color, particularly African-American children, there's not a lot level playing field. They have such a deficit that all the money that he's pumping into the system to help kids, where kids of color are starting from, they're starting from so far below the standard for most Minnesotans that I don't know that he will be able to achieve his idea of equity for those kids at the lowest level. And the lowest level in terms of poverty, in terms of disparity. Minnesota ranks third out of 50 states in the District of Columbia for disparities in education, in housing, in as far as being subject to violence and home ownership. So there's not a level playing field. And as an example, I looked at President Johnson's Great Society back in the 1960s, and he pumped the equivalent. He pumped at that time, I think it was $42 billion. In today's money, it'll be $402 billion. And that was part of the urban renewal. That was a part of the Great Society program and the poverty programs. Look at where we are now. So my concern is that Governor Walz is pumping this money in. A lot of people will certainly benefit. Under his plan, 90% of Minnesotans qualify for his plan because the income threshold is at $200,000. So there's only 10% of Minnesotans who make more than $200,000. So with 90% of people of Minnesotans sharing this pie, I don't know that the people at the very bottom of the ladder will receive the benefit of those who are much farther along economically, educationally, in terms of housing ownership, et cetera. So I'm cautiously optimistic about what can be achieved.
Well,
If I can-
that leads me to Jonathan, to ask you about the United Black Legislative Agenda. We've decided at Insight News to be and do a campaign for the duration of the current legislative session. It should run through May, and every week we're going to be running either this ad that we're showing you right now or a variation of it. The idea is to articulate that there is a legislative agenda from the Black community, and that agenda focuses on the question of investing, because we have resources now that we've not had before. And if we don't do it now, shame on us. And I think the lesson is that if we, the Black community, don't demand and organize and mobilize and ensure that our concerns are addressed and our needs met and our opportunities both recognized and supported, shame on us. So, Jonathan, any thoughts or suggestions or ideas on how we keep our seat at the table, grow our seat at the table, and ensure that out of the $17.6 billion surplus, out of its distribution, our community, the Black community, gets its fair share? What are your thoughts, Jonathan?
A couple pieces that I want to touch a little bit back to Reggie. Reggie, I agree with you in terms of being cautiously optimistic. I know one of the things in terms of how they're allocating the funds, that they've got tier levels as well. So they are actually separating out if you make below 75,000, if you make below 150,000. So it is different tier levels that are geared towards that. And they've also got things that are focusing in on areas that do affect the lower income. You know, they're talking about funding that focuses in on children who are getting the school meals, you know, free and reduced lunch, the Minnesota Food Self program, different aspects of that will help make sure that the funding goes in directions that will help and support those greatest in needs. You know, our agency has a lot of work for the lower income populations. We have our food shelf, clothing services, the connection to resources and education. So we deal a lot with the people who are oftentimes at the lowest rung. And I'm really feeling between Governor Walz, who has come to our center a lot of times. We've actually held meetings here with leadership of the Black community to talk about different priorities, but also Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, as an Indigenous woman who is there and has a daughter in the schools. She's also going to make sure that the focus goes towards that direction. So I'm not 100% and say, yeah, everything's going to go, because it still has some debates to happen. But I think that there is priorities that will focus in on that. What we have to do is make sure that we are in the governor's office, talking to the governor, talking to the lieutenant governor, keeping our priorities first and forefront, and being heard down at the legislature.
Let's go back to one of the other hot topics from today, and that's Tyree. I wanted to get your reactions to the breaking news that the 5 officers have been charged. And I pulled up also for background for those who might be joining the program, a note from Time magazine that says that what date is this one? It's a very recent post from Time saying by Sanya Mansour, updated January 26th, just a few minutes ago, as a matter of fact, but originally published yesterday morning. And the article says that 5 Memphis police officers have been arrested and charged with murder in the beating death of 29-year-old Tyree Nichols on January 7th. Nichols' family lawyer said Nichols was killed following what was supposed to be a routine traffic stop that turned into a brutal beating reminiscent of the 1991 assault on Rodney King. Open quote, it was so violently intentional. There was really no purpose or basis to be that violent or brutal against a defenseless human being. I mean, this is a citizen. These Memphis police officers are charged with protecting their citizens, and instead, they literally unabashedly beat him for over 3 minutes. That's what the attorney Antonio Romanucci told Time on Tuesday. So the 5 officers involved are Tadarius Bean, Demetrius Haley, Emmett Martin III, Desmond Mills Jr., and Justin Smith. They were fired on January 20th after an investigation found that they violated multiple department policies, including excessive use of force, and duty to intervene and duty to render aid. All of the officers, as you can see, are Black. What are your thoughts? What comes to your mind, given the fact that we here in Minnesota are the center of the, I call it the reckoning by dint of George Floyd, but that followed Fernando Castillo, Jamar Clark, and other incidents here. And those followed incidents occurring kind of concurrently around the country. The victimization of Black men and Black women by law enforcement. Generally in those, there'd been white cops killing Black people. Here's a case where Black cops killed a Black man. Jonathan, what do you think?
I think that there, within the justice system and within law enforcement, there are 2 issues that are at the forefront. That one is the systemic racism that it was within there, and 2, the police culture that is within there that is negative. I have a number of friends who are good, honest police officers. I know people who are chiefs that are good, and they hate as much as anybody else the bad officers. But what we have is a systemic issue that exists there. The fact that this has happened so many times. Dante Wright happened during the trial of Derek Chauvin. Mm-hmm. They couldn't even get through the trial of Derek Chauvin, the man who murdered George Floyd. I'm sorry, it just gets me bothered still talking about it. But they couldn't even get through the trial without murdering somebody else in a nearby city, in Brooklyn Center. So you have this existing in such a piece of the culture that it is wrapped up. People don't know the history and how much of it has been set against African Americans, people of color. You know, you go back to your origins of police as starting as slave patrols. You go to things like the Blue Lives Matter starting as a rebuttal against Black Lives Matter. You know, you've got one movement that's talking about people of a particular racial cultural group matter, and then you respond to that by saying the people in this job matter. It's not the same thing, and it was unnecessary. And what you've got is an endemic piece that's right here within the system that needs to change. The values need to be reset. The ideas need to be changed, and we have to go ahead and do something drastic to stop this from happening, including there needs to be a national database that goes ahead and tracks incidents of officer-involved shootings, officer-involved murders, all of the information that is not existing right now as a national database where you can check for anybody.
Any comments, Reggie?
Oh, sure do. First to allude to Jonathan's comment about slave patrols, because that's the slave patrols were the forerunner of the modern police state, and the mentality, the behavior was adopted. That same behavior, and so it's evolved into a culture of power drunkenness. And as we see in this case, it doesn't stop with people who are not African American. I think there's a culture with the police department, and I think the power that the gun and the badge provides to police officers makes them drunk on power. They feel a degree of elitism over to the fact that they lord over people who are quote unquote beneath them. And that's what I think precipitated this case. But the interesting thing is how swiftly quote unquote justice is aimed at these officers. Very swift justice in terms of being fired and charged with murder in just a very short period of time, hardly 2 weeks from the death of Tyree. So that's another issue. The backlash, I think there are people who are beside themselves about being able to charge a black officer with killing a black man. It gives them cover, sort of like the situation we have right now with the secret documents and the presidents and the vice presidents all having them. I think this gives cover to people who say, see, you confront these people in their cars, and this is what can happen. It's not the police, it's the driver, because this even happens to black police. So I think it's just a terrible situation, and I don't think it's going to stop. Also, as Jonathan alluded to, until there's some major intervention in terms of addressing the culture of police and putting the police and the government more under the control of the citizens as they're supposed to be.
We also should note, though, that this is progress. The fact I did not expect to see Derek Chauvin charged and convicted, especially to the extent it was. And so what is good is that we are starting to see more action, more accountability at that level. And one would hope that this continues and can make more of that change happen.
I have a question. Do either of you know whether or not the police department is under the immediate control of the mayor in this town? Because I did a piece in Baltimore a couple of years ago. The police department of the city of Baltimore is not under the control of the city of Baltimore. It's under the control of the governor's office. I found that out during the Freddie Gray situation, and the mayor at the time did not want the police to become more aggressive in the eruption after Freddie Gray, and the governor of Maryland threatened to assume control over the police department and direct them to start cracking heads of citizens in Baltimore over the objection of the mayor. So I don't know if that's the case in other cities and other states, but I'm curious about whether or not they have that power in other places besides Maryland to overrule the mayor and sick the police on the citizens.
I'm not sure about Memphis. There's a couple things. I think it depends upon whether you have a strong mayor or a weak mayor system. In St. Paul's got a strong mayor system, so the police chief reports directly to the mayor. In Minneapolis, changed in the last year or two, but used to have a weak mayor system, and so the police chief reported to the entire council. So I think that's part of the issue where that goes. I think the other issue that comes into play is the police union. And that's been a huge issue in Minneapolis, where it has been, you've seen the union officials make racist statements. You've seen them push and defend racist officers and actions. The police union in at least Minneapolis has been a bigger threat than the governor or the mayor or anybody along those lines. And that's where I think you get entrenched a lot of the systemic racism and these ideas that embolden officers to take these actions, because they know they have these powerful unions that will go to the wall to defend them on actions that they shouldn't be defending them on. They should be holding them accountable on.
That's absolutely right. I just in closing, that's just happened in Baltimore right after the Freddie Gray situation. The newly elected district attorney Marilyn Mosby went after the officers, and nobody got she tried to prosecute everybody. Nobody was charged. Nobody went to jail, and they retaliated against her. And she is currently under indictment and has a case coming up where they try to disbar her. And people in the know in Baltimore realize that it's a police union retaliation that's going on right in front of our faces.
Al, I think you're muted a little bit there.
Can't hear you, Al.
Yeah. So you may want to check the settings. Right now, Reggie, I really appreciate the information. I think we're also going to talk about the new cereal from Snoop Dogg and Master P. Wow.
Snoop Loops.
Snoop Loops. Okay. On the scale of things, I never thought I would see Snoop Loops. Snoop Dogg having a cereal. Let me tell you, Snoop Dogg, you gotta admire the way this man has had a career arc that has gone from some of the activity that let's just say was not necessarily in line with the law to being with his own breakfast cereal, to being with Martha Stewart, to being on shows, and to being top of the line. So this is impressive. Do we have a clip to show?
There we go.
Said, they was with us to the end, Snoop. We had to change our name, which I think is even a better name.
Me too.
Snoop Cereal.
Hey, hello. Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Y'all see we shining Snoop Cereal.
They can't take that from me.
No. And when you talk about me and Snoop, about to show y'all right now the first 3 cereal that's coming out for June. And Snoop, what is that right there?
Oh, wow. Is that drizzle?
Yeah.
Is that frosty?
And you know what? We're taking this to Wick. And that because we 2 Wick kids, grew up in the ghetto, and now coming from Wick to owning our own company is crazy, right?
It really is, bro.
Y'all can do it too. So we're gonna taste this right quick. And Snoop.
No milk needed.
We're gonna put it in that bowl. So we got 3 different bowls because we got 3 different cereals coming out for June. Y'all see how that look?
See that frost on the
And I want to let y'all know this is healthy because everybody keeps saying make some healthy cereal, right, Snoop?
Right. They always want to say, well, don't have it too, out of pocket because I'm living a different life now. I want to be healthy. So we're going to look out for you. You want to be healthy? We're going to make it healthy for you. Look at this. But we got that frost on the top, though.
Yeah.
See that frost?
And shout out to Post for teaming up with us.
What do you think, Jonathan?
So that is quite interesting, and I just had a chance to do a quick look at it. It looks like the name Snoop Loops was blocked by a quote unquote unnamed cereal company. So I'll let people draw their own connections from that, and so that's why they've gone over to the Snoop cereal and the other name, but. It's interesting to see this kind of branching out because you're breaking into an industry that almost everybody loves cereal, and you've got an industry that's got a huge potential for growth. You've got big names like Snoop Dogg and Master P, so you'll get some name recognition right off the bat. So it's going to be interesting to watch this grow. And see what they can build out of it. I saw the Frosted Drizzlers, I guess it was, which looked a little bit like another breakfast cereal. So I won't name that. The overall, I think it is a good endeavor and a place to increase some wealth. What about you, Reggie?
Well, interesting. I respect Snoop. I appreciate what he's doing. But when I first heard about the cereal, I thought because of what, Snoop is a big cannabis person. I thought, oh, this is just for the munchies. This is just for people with the munchies. That's where this guy's going. And then I heard about the WIC connection, the Women's Infants and Children's Nutrition Program, part of the SNAP program by the federal government. And I'm thinking this must be nutritious. I don't think they could simply designate it as such. I think it would have to be evaluated for its nutrition value.
Yep.
And if it has good nutrition value, hey, why not? Let them join the fray and take some of this money from Post and General Mills and provide a good product for people who need it.
Yeah,
I still think it's going to be for people with munchies, though, too.
Yeah, hey, I am not mad at him, and that may have been where the actual idea came up from. To go ahead, I can see Snoop.
Here's the big question. Can you guys hear me now? Can you hear me
we
now?
can.
So the big question is, what does it mean for shifting the industry? Do we see this as an opportunity to encourage General Mills and to encourage Kellogg and other companies to look at our consumer power differently, to cut us in on the deal so that we're not just consumers, but we're also beneficiaries, not just a full belly, but a return on the process for creating these products and selling them, moving them, and our purchasing them? How do we get a more return on our purchasing investment? Jonathan, what do you think? We got about a minute left.
I think there's a good opportunity. What I'd love to see is something similar to what Dwayne McDuffie and Dennis Cowan did with DC Comics with Milestone Media. So they created their own Black characters in a self-contained universe, but they distributed through DC Comics. So it had the DC Comics imprint, but they retained all the creative rights. And so they generated their own wealth off of that, but the characters have been integrated in the DC universe with them still doing it. I'd love to see the same thing with the cereal. Let's have more creative cereals that tap into cultural aspects but are utilized and buoyed by Post, by General Mills, and by some of the others that can help.
Reggie, in the few seconds we have left, talk about Black History, that cover article you've got. What should we be thinking about Black history?
We should be thinking about African American history. We should be thinking about African American history. In the article, I talked about the shock that I had as a freshman in college. Went to a school where I was one of 15 African American students. It was a Catholic school, so 6 of those students were in the seminary that we never saw. So there were really 9 of us.
10 seconds.
Yeah, there were 9 of us in a school of 2,000. And when I mentioned that I was having a radio program to talk about stopping Black History Month, the white kids went nuts. They loved it. So that's any indication.
To get the full story, go to insightnews.com or look at issue. We're out of time. Brothers, thank you so much. Great conversation. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. We'll be here again tomorrow at 1. Remember to go to YouTube, and subscribe to the Insight News channel. I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you tomorrow.